Hey.
Bob Kalka.
Good to see you again, sir.
Good to see you. This is the third time we've met in person.
Indeed.
And I am privileged to have this conversation with you.
Privilege is mine.
You're very gracious. And we're calling this a podcast, but to be honest, this is a recording in search of a podcast.
Whatever works.
Some things, are actually put, hey, Rob, can you do this podcast? I should, oh, great. Which podcast? Oh, don't you have one? It says, well, it's in the works, not yet. All right. So we're doing the recording before the podcast actually exists. But this is going to be on the Information Security Summit YouTube channel. And in case you're wondering, I didn't see a camera in that room. So I've literally propped my iPhone on two boxes, and that's how we're getting the video of this thing. So there isn't just a slide photo still of us on YouTube.
I've done stranger.
Recording. So
I've done stranger things.
So Bob Kalka, you're VP of Security for IBM. What is the proper title?
Actually, Global Lead for Cybersecurity. I've spent 29 of my 34 years at IBM building the distributed security business from zero to about a $3 billion annual business for us.
So I sat in on the presentation that you gave earlier this morning, and I'm looking forward to sitting in on another one that you're giving later tonight if they let me into the room. But one of the things that you mentioned that I just absolutely thought, I got to talk about that. You mentioned your degree in organizational psychology.
Yeah.
And we can talk about the bits and the bytes, the blocking and the tackling, the firewall ports and the tools and the SIMs and all of the stuff that security nerds love to talk about, the people in, as you've described it, the cyber bubble.
Yeah.
But all of this is stuff that is for human beings, used by human beings, with human beings. And that's the part that us security nerds, especially us technologists, often forget. Yeah,
and aren't comfortable with. I got a computer science degree from Rochester Institute of Technology, where I met my wife of 30 years now, and had zero interest in psychology. I was a typical techie nerd. I just wanted to... in fact, the day I joined IBM, I told my boss, I was an assembler programmer.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow.
x86 assembler is what I specialized in. And I literally, the day I joined IBM, I said, all I want to do is I want you to lock me away in a room for 30 years so I can write assembler code.
Slide pizza under the door.
Yeah, slide pizza under the door. And I said, in 30 years, just slide a check under the door. And I thought that's what I was going to do. Mm-hmm. However, what happened was about 2 or 3 years into writing assembler code, I started noticing that when my heart came alive was when I was talking to the clients that were using the code I had written. And I never thought I'd ever want to do that. And I said, wait a minute, I actually am way more excited about that part of the job than this part of it. And so I said to my boss, I said, hey, can I, do more of that? And he said, yeah, why don't you run our beta test programs for everything? I said, okay. And I still remember to this day, the first time IBM sent me anywhere, I'd been with the company, I think, 4 years, sent me to a client. I still remember the guy's name, and he's out there somewhere, Mike Danley from Owens Corning Fiberglass in Toledo, Ohio.
Oh, wow.
At the
That's
time,
an hour and a half drive from here.
I know.
Far.
I was living in upstate New York at the time. I've lived in Austin, Texas now for 27 years. Before that, I was in upstate New York. And I thought it was like a garden spot on earth. I've been everywhere else in the earth now, so nothing against Toledo, but it wasn't as pretty as someplace. But I still remember the visit. And I realized that working with clients is what really mattered. And so then I said, hey, I want to get more into that stuff. And that's when I started working on cyber. And I started seeing that...
Did we even call it cyber back then?
No. Back then, that was... So, cybersecurity, which is, let's call that a 6 or 7 year thing. It was information security for a while. Mm-hmm. Before that, it was network security. In the late 90s, if you said security, everybody thought you were talking about firewalls and antivirus stuff like that.
Blocking ports and
all that stuff. And in 94, when I did my first cyber job, it wasn't even called, I don't even remember what it was called. I think it was Kerberos authentication. But anyways, so I started working with clients, and I'd walk into them and say, well, here's your security issue, and here's what you should do. And they'd say, yeah. We should.
We should.
And that was it.
Did it ever get past the should?
1 out of 20 times. And so I was.
Wait a minute. You mean this is common? You mean it's not just the other people, or it's not just me that's done this? Everybody else has done. You're saying the majority haven't done this?
No. The majority would say, "I know what we should do, but thank you for the information, but we're just not prepared to do that yet."
That's the common
and
response.
And I was confused by it because I'm going, "What?" So that's when I had a chance to go to school at night because and get an MBA, and I started out getting an MBA in marketing, and then I discovered the org psychology part, and I said, "Oh, that addresses the confusion in the job right now." So I get a degree working with Dr. Gary Gemmel, one of the world's leading experts in small group psychology. I'm still a dear friend and mentor to this day. And all of a sudden, everything made sense. I'd walk into a client, they'd go, "Yeah, we should do that. Good idea," and then move on. And then understand what was going on in the organization around them that was causing that to happen. Because when you understand that, you can help clients actually make some progress on it. Because the basis for organizational psychology is the same as individual psychology applied against groups. So to be specific, in individual psychology, if you're into this whole Gestalt, Jungian kind of thing, is that in individual psychology, we all have what's called a shadow. And it's the things we don't like about ourselves or the things people have told us about ourselves we don't like. And you don't focus on them because if you did, you'd be miserable all the time, right? So they're in you, but you don't pay attention to them, and you pretend they're not there, but they do, and they influence a lot of the things you do. Group psychology is the same exact thing. Groups of people, like a cybersecurity team, has a shadow of things that they believe about themselves, such as we're never going to be able to really solve this identity management problem that we have. So
cynicism about the concept, or cynicism about their ability to do it?
Their ability to do it. Because here's the biggest thing, the core point that we're going to talk about, you'll see come up often, is that cyber teams are really good at doing things that they fully control. And that's why cyber teams are great at doing threat management. So, because
they have an action plan.
Well, because they own the whole problem. Meaning,
it's tactical.
Meaning, I put in the tooling in the Security Operations Center to pull in all the feeds, find the suspicious-looking stuff, vet it, and then do something about it. They own the whole problem. The only collaboration they have to do outside of what I like to call the cyber bubble, which is everybody in an organization that's the cyber person, cyber people, is just get others to feed them their information. That's the extent of the collaboration.
And by cyber people, we don't mean those guys from the Doctor Who series,
Right, exactly.
Not the Cybermen.
That's the cybersecurity staff, whatever. So, and then on the backside is that once they do find a threat, then they have to collaborate with people outside of the cyber bubble to actually make changes, or notify the Department of Health and Human Services that we had a breach and that regulations require us to do that. But
the human interface.
Yeah, but guess what? Guess what the weakest part of threat management is today? It is what people call SOAR, or Security Orchestration Automated Response. Once you find a problem, you got to go fix it. That's the point at which the cyber teams have to collaborate with others. And over 50% of organizations are not properly prepared for a cyber attack because they can't even get that team to show up to run through potential exercises.
Is this the thing we call table talks?
So tabletops is generally what they'll call them. And once a year you get everybody, the CIO, CTO, they'll come in and do a tabletop cyber attack, simulated cyber attack. And the cyber team goes, we did our annual tabletop, and so we're good.
And they check it off the list.
They check it off the list. I've talked to dozens of CIOs that have participated in those, and the typical response I get is, yeah, I went to that. I didn't really understand the scenario. I didn't get much out of it. But the cyber team's going, we're good. We're collaborative. We work together. Just because they showed up in the room, even though they didn't really participate. See what I mean? That's an example of it. So the key around organizational psychology is to understand what's in the group's shadow of the things that it believes that but can't face, and go beyond surface level engagement collaboratively Like I went to the tabletop exercise and I didn't understand it, but everybody checked the box and we feel good even though we're not prepared, right? And go beyond that, just like a punch in the clock or putting on a show or whatever it is, right? And so, but this explains why. I just gave you an example in threat management, which is what the cyber bubbles are really good at doing, is the threat management. The side they're not so good at, really right now, is identity and access management. And the proof of that is I just, over about 5-6 different sessions, met with 150 CISOs and had them talk about what are we struggling with on identity and access management. And what, if you're not familiar with IAM, right, it's what users are there.
So for the people who aren't security nerds,
so
CISO, Chief Information Security Officer. And identity and access management. That's the thing that deals with us signing on to stuff.
Yeah, setting up an account for you, defining what you need to sign in, depending on where you're trying to get to, and then removing your access in your account when you don't need access anymore, which most people are horrible at. Most organizations are horrible.
Oh, wait a minute. You mean
doing.
These VPN accounts from contractors that have left the company are still there, and
there's the evidence, right? The evidence is that the world is full of. So I'll give you an example. I had a client. They had a small group of people in the IT team. It wasn't the cyber team, but a small group of people in IT who had access to everything in the organization. It was a multifaceted.
Well, of course, they're in
organization.
IT. They should have access to everything.
Right, but of course they did. Right, of course. But what happened was they only needed access to probably a quarter of what they had access to. But what happened is, and it popped up. We did an audit, and it popped up. Why does this small group of people have access to everything, including the crown jewels of the company? And what we found out is that their mission had changed 3 times in 2 years. And so predictably what had happened is they were given access for their first mission, change in mission, nobody cleaned up the old access, gave them new access. So after 3 mission changes, they had access to everything, right? That's wrong. Now, in their case, fortunately, that team wasn't taking advantage of having access to stuff they didn't have.
That's only because they didn't have the evil administrator.
Or someone had compromised one of their accounts and purposely then took advantage of it.
And made them look like an evil administrator because,
exactly.
even though they weren't.
Yeah. So you see the psychology there. The issue is that identity and access management, that task is so hard to manage well because it requires us to be collaborating with the rest of the organization on an ongoing basis, and none of them necessarily has the same goals we do. You might philosophically say, well, of course they want to keep secure. Well, of course they want to run their business and move it forward faster and grow the business faster. And anything we do in cyber that gets in the way, they go, I'm just not interested in the topic. Do what you got to do and then get out of here, kind of thing.
So talking about psychology for a minute, a lot of people, unfortunately, in a lot of things, and perhaps many of us are guilty of this, use a simplistic approach. So the simplistic approach is if I yell at these security people long enough, that'll motivate them, or if I yell at everybody, that'll motivate them to get it done. And that is often the simplistic thinking of, gee, if I bark loud enough or if I threaten them loud enough. That's not really psychology.
No, and honestly, that's not the typical problem that we see. The typical problem that we see is ignorance, and I don't mean ignorant people. I mean people being ignorant and being responsive. So the cyber team can say, "Hey, we've got this issue, and you're part of this, and we need your help." The typical response is, well aware of the problem, we're doing pretty well on that, so why don't you go over and talk to that part of the organization, because I'm pretty sure they're not. So I'll give you an example that proves the point. So in 2003, I think it was, that Sarbanes-Oxley regulations, right, came out for banking.
Wait a minute, what year was that?
2003.
Wait a minute, that was 20 years ago.
20 years ago, literally.
So we've done everything that's on that list by now, haven't we?
Well, here's the best part. One of the first things I saw from the government is the way to implement the SOX, as it was called, Sarbanes-Oxley legislation, is one of the first things you should do is implement privileged account management. And what that means is not just basic identity and access management, but the privileged users like the sysadmins. Because if you're not familiar,
they got the keys to the kingdom.
Yeah, they can do. People who have sysadmins accounts can do anything they want in the systems, and then go in the audit logs and erase their tracks if they want to. So privileged account management says we're going to put tighter controls around those like sysadmins. That's not only those, but let's just for sake of simplicity here, that's one of the examples of the types of accounts. And so you would think that 20 years later, everybody's done privileged account management. And guess what? It's partially true. But that's the problem. It's partially true.
I say that sarcastically,
exactly.
Just to add emphasis.
No, everybody has done, most people have done privileged account management, but what happens is if, let's just say for sake of discussion, you have 6 different types of systems, 6 different types of admins out there. Generally, the typical client will go into has it applied to 1 or 2 of those teams. And the reason is, the psychology behind it is they went to the other 4 teams and say, you need to do this. And they go, yeah, we do, but we're in the middle of this and it's strategic. And so you really don't want to bother us because you don't want us telling our bosses that you guys are getting in our way of doing this major project that we're in the middle of. And we're doing pretty good there anyways. And so we'll check back in with you. And the security team's going, okay, we'll just write that down for the future. And the future never comes, right? So what's happened is, in the industry, is the world is full of underdeployed privileged account management, or PAM as it's called, tools for the sysadmin accounts and stuff. And it's been 20 years. Why all of a sudden is it getting white hot again? Because cyber insurance providers, most organizations are getting cyber insurance because, a lot of people getting hacked. Cyber insurance providers discovered this, that people aren't universally in their shops protecting these because a lot of the hackers will come in and compromise a privileged account. And
Wait a minute, those actuaries of insurance started crunching the numbers on cyber.
And paying attention to what was going on. They said, why is that not done here? And it's not there, not there. So now it's actually a very big thing in the industry.
It's analogous to telling everybody to buckle your seatbelts.
Yeah.
Reduce the risk.
And we're not going to pull the jet back from the thing until everybody's buckled their seatbelt kind of thing.
Right.
And we're actually going to look. So the cyber insurance providers are saying, look, if you have not deployed privileged account management to all the privileged accounts, we're not going to reissue your policy.
And to the point of the cyber insurance folks, they've had to do this because an attitude of a lot of businesses has been, up to this point, hey, let's just spend money on cyber insurance, not spend money on security.
Oh, correct. Well, yeah.
Pass the buck.
Yeah. Right.
To be fair.
Nobody will say it on the surface, but exactly. And by the way, that's an example of this, is the goal, the real benefit of organizational psychology and cybersecurity is that, just like with personal psychology, you just got to be willing to face reality. You got to be willing to see the things that make you feel uncomfortable because they tweak that stuff that's in your shadow that, we'll never really solve that problem, but we can't tell anyone because we have to look like professionals, right? So when you see one of those things, you're like, please don't go there, right? And yet you have to, and that's what good leaders do. Good leaders say, I know it's uncomfortable, I know it's hard, I know it's disturbing beyond belief that we haven't solved this yet. But when you see it for the reality that it is, it allows you to take steps to actually do something about it. Like, for example, we'll see a lot of CISOs when they go, I didn't want to see that, and I knew it was true, but I can't pretend it's not. They'll bring their peers into a cyber range activity and go through a simulated attack. Because with a simulated attack, what happens is everybody shows up and goes, okay, I'm doing this. So is this in place of our annual tabletop, right? Can I take credit for our tabletop this year if I just show up to this? And I've participated in dozens of these. So, and you see the looks on their eyes, the non-cyber people, okay, well, it was nice to get away. Our cyber range, for example, is in Boston. So it was nice to go to Boston.
By our IBM's cyber range.
Yeah, we have a cyber range in Cambridge, and you can go have dinner at Legal Seafoods and have a time away from the office.
It's a really cool event. I know you talked about that in our conversation 4 years ago.
Well, it's just an example. We're not the only ones that have them. But what happens is they walk in, they're clearly okay, let's just get through this. And within 20 or 30 minutes, the look in their eyes changes from, okay, this is kind of interesting, I'll at least try, into fully engaged. And going, and what happens every single time, without fail, is probably about the 40-minute mark of the exercise, which is generally about a half day, everybody's going, not only am I really uncomfortable right now, but I'm really uncomfortable because I know we're not ready. I'm not ready, whether it's the CIO, CTO, business line manager. I'm not ready if this happens to us. And I'm looking really dull right now in a safe setting. And I don't want to look dull in a real live one. So maybe I'm going to pay more attention. And that's what happens. Right? So that's a way, that is a cyber range activity is a great way to start changing this sort of psychological complexion of how the leadership team integrates on this topic.
So leadership and the psychology as a tool to get things done is meaningful and something that hasn't been considered by the folks in the cyber world. But another thing that is being talked about is the impact of stress on the cybersecurity professional.
Yeah.
At this conference, out in the hallway, there are therapy dogs. I kid you not. For the first time ever, there are therapy dogs here. Yeah. And I thought, that is cool. They're cute dogs.
Yeah.
But, I laugh about that, but I also think to myself, yeah, there are probably a lot of people who are very glad that they're here. And I can remember my daughter's high school when they were having midterms and finals. They had therapy dogs in the school. And I thought, wow, they never did that when I was in high school. I thought, what a different world we live in. And you joke about that, but then you suddenly realize, wait a minute, the world today is not the world of the 1980s or the 1990s. It's a very different world. And the stress paradigms are very different today. And maybe some of us or some people who are outside of cyber are not aware of the stress on the cyber professional, especially when they're being told by, if they're working for non-technical management, who may be very well-meaning, but is just in the "get it done, damn it," mantra, because that's what they're being told.
Yeah.
It creates a challenge. How does, for too much of a preamble here, how does the cyber professional today deal with that stress?
Well, so keep in mind that where stress comes from is, let's not even go to AI yet, but stress comes from the fact that if I walk into my job as a cyber analyst, for example, and I say, well, I've got like a SIM tool with a dashboard, and I've got 10 other tools with dashboards I need to worry about, and I get some triangulation between them and stuff, but I realize there's no way I can pay attention to all this at the same time. And so stress is created because you go, if we get hacked, and it's on my watch, needless to say, that's a potential CLM, as we call them, career limiting move, kind of thing. And so that creates natural stress. So, and then you add in the fact that a lot of the attacks now are being generated using AI. So then you go, well, that causes even more stress. But
how do I fight that?
But
it's like being assimilated by the board.
No, but what's happening now is we and many others is we're building AI into our defense capabilities too. So you have AI helping you not only be able to detect the attacks a lot faster and a lot more in real time, but also you have supporting technologies like workflow automation and stuff that allows you, instead of looking at 11 different tools, is looking at one dashboard that helps you with what all those tools are seeing, and what they're basing on, hey, this is suspicious, this isn't, is increasingly based on AI in the best sense. We've been doing this, right? We've been doing Watson for decades. We've been using Watson for cyber, like threat intelligence, for 6-7 years now.
Watson, you mean that computer that played Jeopardy about 10
years
ago?
That beat, was it Jennings back, 2009, I think it was. 2009 that happened.
10, yeah.
Yeah, now we call it Watson X now, but it's that ability to protect the business based on that. So let's get back to your original question. So stress as a cyber analyst is that we as vendors owe it to them to bake good AI into our tools so they can actually get their job done and have much more visibility than they've had in the past.
So these tools, to use a metaphor, become power tools.
Yeah. That's certainly a way to look at it. So it is interesting. And also, from a stress level point of view, it's also important, as I've said a couple of times, to face the realities. And like an individual analyst, of course they need to do that, but especially for the CISOs and CSOs, is I just made if you're not familiar with this stuff, there's a chief information security officer and a chief security officer. And I know it sounds really close, but the difference is the chief information security officer owns IT security. The chief security officer owns IT and physical security. And I can tell you from experience, don't call a CSO a CISO, just a word of advice. But anyways, but that leadership role has to be willing to see the reality there. There's a great one of the like most esteemed people in organizational psychology is a retired Harvard professor named Chris Argyris. And he put out a book that's one of the seminal tomes of this whole topic called Overcoming Organizational Defenses. And he argues that in the business world, in the Western world, is that all business operates under the same three principles underneath it all. One is that everybody wants to win. Second, everybody wants to be in control of something. And three, most people don't want to offend others. And what he says is, when an organization runs with those as the three core principles, everybody wants to be in control of something, everybody wants to win, and then most people don't want to offend others. He says, think about an organization, you have these resources, but everybody wants to be in control of something, so you start having the team break into smaller and smaller pieces. And so instead of having kind of an integrated whole, you start getting people looking for how can I own something and be the king of my own little world. Mm-hmm. Then everybody wants to win. So what happens is the organization, the teams will start putting in goals that look challenging, but they know as insiders they're mildly challenging, but they want to get good bonuses and stuff. So they're going to set metrics that optimize their team, not necessarily the organization on a whole. And then, so you start getting more and more pieces of an organization that are kind of not really feeding the organizational whole, even though everybody will say, oh, we're all in this together. And then, because they don't want to offend each other, if they see something going on in another group that's ineffective, they won't bring it up. Because they're like, oh, if they looked at what we're doing, kind of thing. So this is Argyris' thing. And he says what happens when you do that is inevitably you start making incompetent decisions as an organization.
This sounds like a subplot from the movie The Office.
Yeah, well, there you go. I mean, that's probably the philosophy behind the whole thing. So what happens is you'll see an opportunity pop in the middle of this organization, and you'd go, we should be able to knock this out of the park. But nobody wants to, they're trying to be big shots, and So the organization doesn't do the right thing. It's incompetent. That is an incompetent decision of the organization as a whole. And what Argyris says is the problem is when if that's not addressed, then the organization becomes skilled at making incompetent decisions without even thinking about it. And his theory is called skilled incompetence. But the reason I went through all that, A, because it's fascinating, but B, he says the only solution to that is that, and I roughly quote from the book, I haven't read it in 20 years, but I remember this part, is the only antidote to this is senior management being willing to see data that dissents with their current point of view. Because what happens is as things are rolling up to senior management, oftentimes they'll get what the team below them thinks they want to hear, as opposed to what the truth is.
Wait a minute. People are saying people don't want to say what they think.
Right.
They want to say what they think is desired
to be heard. So what happens is when senior management gets dissenting data, often, there's a thing of saying, that's a one-off. But when they say, wait a minute, let's look at that more. And they may find that there's other stuff, they go, wait a minute, what? And when senior management does that, it breaks that model, which is the best thing you could do. So the reason I shared all that with you is, remember, goal of healthy cybersecurity is to face reality. You see why. If we want to be in control, we want to own something, we want to be successful, we don't want to offend anyone, there's kind of a psychological built-in thing not to face reality because it's hard and you say, we don't know what to do about that, but that's a truth. Then they're worried that someone's going to say, well, why am I paying you money to do your job if you see this problem you can't do anything about?
concept that you've articulated so beautifully, I am challenged to even do anything other than reference it.
Arduous was pretty good.
It exists in a lot, if not most organizations.
Well, exactly. We're applying it against cyber here, but it applies to everything.
That's what I'm thinking as you describe this, because I visualize in my mind exactly what you described.
You got to face reality, man. And by the way, it's dangerous to understand that theory from Arduous, because you'll start noticing it more and more.
I have an anecdote from personal experience when I worked for a subsidiary of a Fortune 500 company, and I was through the food chain. The CEO handed it down to the CFO, who handed it down to me. Didn't want to be on this conference call. They said, well, Rob, you take it. And so I'm on this conference call with probably 50 other people who are on the phone, with probably a room of 100 people where this conference call is happening live. And of course, what do? They put the phone that is feeding the group at the middle or end of the room, thinking it's like Star Trek, that we're all magically going to hear. And I was kind of astonished how 10 minutes into the call, nobody said anything. And I'm listening to this very faint broadcast. And so I finally thought, I'm just going to be obnoxious. I hit the mute button to unmute myself, and I spoke, "Excuse me," talking as loud as I could, projecting into my phone so that they would hear me on the other end. There's probably 50 of us who are listening to this on the phone, and none of us can hear it. Would you either A, ask the speaker to move by the phone, or B, pick up the phone and move it by the speaker? And I'm thinking to myself, this Fortune 500 company has tasked how many people to take an hour out of their day to be in the same room? By the way, it was a privacy and security topic.
Party on Garth,
yeah. And to spend all this human time, which has a cost in the aggregate to that organization. And yet this silly little detail of letting people hear the conversation. And as soon as I said that, there must have been 20 people chiming in on the phone saying, yes, we can't hear it. Nobody wanted to speak up.
Yeah, and I can even predict to you based on what was happening in that room. So probably the last 2 times they had that call, it was kind of boring. And so most people showed up and said, look, I just got to show my face, and I'm not going to ask any questions because I want to get this over as quick as possible.
Check the box.
And then check the box. And I can't really hear it, but cool. That sort of, I can think about something else, work on something else on the stuff. And I don't want to say anything about it because it's uncomfortable. But if nobody else says anything, I'm not going to say anything about it. And in 50 minutes, I can get out of here. Right? Because if I ask questions, oh no, they might try to fix the technology and then it's going to go over it. You just see what I mean? That's all psychology. That's all psychology. So once again, bottom line, you got to be willing to face reality, especially when the reality dissents with your current point of view.
Bob, for those folks who want to continue to learn, how do they find you? How do they find your talks?
Oh, you can get
this?
me. It's Bob Kalka, Kalka. You can find me on Twitter, Bob Kalka. You can find me on LinkedIn, Bob Kalka, IBM, Facebook, whatever. I'm happy to talk anytime.
And you're part of the now. Do you actually do services with organizations with IBM? And they find you?
Well, no. I'm on the product side of our business. Mm-hmm. I've been on both the product and service side of our business, and I literally meet with clients every day and help them get healthier, right? How they're doing cyber, and it's still a love. I mean, I've flown 9 million miles with American Airlines.
9 million. I just hit. With American, I just hit 7,000 miles. and 70 with Delta, but
yeah, there you go. No, I just hit,
I'm just trying to imagine 9 million miles.
And technically 9.1 million air miles with American Airlines. And that's doing nothing but
and probably
flying
half
around.
the Air Force workforce of American Airlines probably recognizes you on site.
Some of them do. I have dear friends who have worked for American longer than I've been. The 34 years I've been at IBM, and it's pretty humorous. But no, it's been just a dream of a career because I get to meet with people all over the world every day talking about this topic. And as someone said there's a great saying that when you listen, you might actually learn something. And so I've been able to learn a lot of stuff through that lens of the dynamics of the people involved. And so it's really intriguing.
Well, unfortunately, it's only been just over a half-hour conversation. I could talk for hours with this gentleman, but far be it for me to be so selfish. You've got a whole conference to talk to. I thank you for this
great to see you again,
privileged conversation. Thank you.
All right, look for a chat.